we start training recruits from day one. What are we doing right with those fresh minds, and what can we do better?
Beauty before age, Gerard.
All righty, too easy. Thank you, Dave. All right. So first of all, thank you for having me, Debbie, again with Op Central. Thanks everyone for turning up so we can have this discussion. I believe that the previous speakers have presented some brilliant points on training. I know the private chat behind scenes is all about what the topic is. Before I go on, I just want to share that while I work for Fire Rescue Victoria, the views that I share are my own and probably not reflective of the organisation. And I'll start with what we're doing right now. We're doing a lot right, which is a really good news, but I've limited it to 4 points. And the first point that I want to bring in is that we've started to develop instructors. Historically, and going on into the future, I believe that firefighting will be taught by firefighters. That is the industry. That's what we've always done. Historically, though, we picked interested and capable instructors to come to the college to teach their chosen subjects without really giving them the back end of how to train people. So we found experts, but we never gave them the tools to understand how to teach people or how to assess people competently. I know that my organisation and organisations around Australia have really focused on developing the instructors. So now if you want to become an instructor, you need to do a Certificate 4 under the National Framework in Training and Assessing. And that gives you a broad-based spectrum covering things from language learning and numeracy right through to how to assess to a competent level. And I believe that that's a brilliant step forward in the right direction when we're talking about training recruits. The second point follows on from the first one. By developing instructors, we're now changing the way we teach and present. Working with recruits, we've started adjusting to their learning needs. So we're starting to identify that people learn different ways. The age-old adage of you can't teach a goldfish to climb a tree, but you can definitely teach it to swim really applies here. And I've seen it in my own experience as a structural instructor and on reflection. We've really shifted our department's focus from why aren't they learning what we're teaching them to how can I teach it better? It's up to me as the instructor to teach the recruits. All the recruits need to bring is a good attitude and a willingness to learn. From there, I've got to present the information so they can pick it up. The third point that I think we're doing right, we're meeting a national standard here in Australia now. So all of our recruit training is based upon national standards. This ensures that there's the same standard across the country. So in Australia, we have state-based fire services in the public sector, and often big bushfires, U.S.A. jobs, even backfilling of fire stations is done in a mutual aid agreement. So by ensuring that we're meeting a national standard, we're ensuring that everyone's trained to the same level. And I'm hoping that this eventually allows for more exchanges and interchanges. And I know that there's a question later about moving around, so I won't steal the thunder there. But the more we move around, the more we talk, the more opportunities we have to hold these talks and attend these talks. We really learn a lot from each other internationally. Like there's always been the European school and the American school of firefighting. And we're seeing real cross blend now as those ideas come together. And it's just a very exciting time. Meeting a national standard lastly sets an expectation to be met. And that expectation isn't derived by me as an instructor or by the organisation, but it's driven by a national standard that is built from the Australian Fire Councils. Lastly, what we're doing right, and we touched on this at previous Op Central roundtable discussion, is we're recruiting from more diverse backgrounds. And I've really seen a shift towards more inclusivity within the fire service because of this. And it's ended the boys club mentality. I know I'm probably one of the younger panelists on the table today, and I've probably got the least experience. I joined the fire service in 2012 after being a volunteer for a couple of years before that. But I've seen probably a shift from that old school hard man fire service to a more inclusive fire service that's building better, more well-rounded and people that are aware of their well-being. The other thing that we're getting from recruiting from diverse backgrounds is we're becoming more contemporary from different ideas. We're bringing in new people from different cultures, different backgrounds, different work arrangements. And those people are now coming into the fire service and bringing their experience and their wealth of knowledge, which is helping us better connect with our community and better meet community standards and expectations, as well as it's increasing equipment innovations. We're seeing some bold equipment changes in the last 10 years, and that's just going to continue. I mean, we're even talking now about virtual reality training and all that kind of stuff. It's just brilliant. Coming around to what we can do better, again, I could talk on the subject all day, but I've limited it to 3 points. So the first point, and I see this in Australian fire service training, not just my organisation, but around the country, I believe if we did a task analysis of what we expect a recruit firefighter to do at the end of their recruit training, we'd be able to focus training more on what they need. Currently, I know that recruits might need to understand radio communications to a level that an officer understands, yet they will not use or operate a radio for many, many years. And that's just one example. So by doing a task-based analysis of what we require people, or how we require people to act once they've finished recruits, maybe we can refocus the training so that we're getting a really good product and we're using our time efficiently. I mean, we're always bound by time constraints. So if we focus on what we could do and what we need them to do, we could really tailor training around that. Next up, Chris and Steve touched on this in the first question. We're so multifaceted now. We've got so many things going on right now. I feel that some things are suffering as a cause of it. So for me, that's fire. I know I'm pretty biased because I'm a structural instructor and I really love firefighting. I don't go chasing the tech rescue tickets. I stick to my fire. But I think we need to get back to teaching fire. Normalization of deviance. Fire is now becoming something that we've always done. So does it really need that importance? And I was thinking the other day, like, if we're teaching rope rescue, we're so serious about everything. We don't let anyone complete a task without being checked off and safe. With fire, we're just laughing and joking around as we're teaching pumps, or as we're teaching structural firefighting. So I think a focus back onto that would be good, and to give more time to that to achieve that proficiency. In Australia, the fire services are the only services that deal with fire, but many services deal with rescue. So let's get back to our core business there. And lastly, I think what we could do better would be become contemporary. We're now moving into this really exciting time in the fire service where we can base our practices on evidence and research. And this is brilliant. First time in the history of the fire service, we might be able to finally break 200 years of tradition unimpeded by progress, because we've got companies like UL, we've got research places like CSIRO doing studies on how to better do our job. Let's reflect that in recruit training. Let's take UL studies, let's take NIST studies, let's take CSIRO and put them into our recruit training so that we are training based on evidence. I know the Australian model is based upon the European model, and there are still things we teach from the manuals of firemanship published back in the early 1900s, like the plant and sweep for BA. We now have ticks, we now have torches, we now get low, smoke's hot, we don't stand in it. Let's reflect that in our recruit training. And let's continue to move towards embracing new technologies, new evidence, and best practice to get the best outcome for the community. So as I said, I could talk about this all day, but Dave, I'll pass over to you. Thank you.
You know what, you covered off almost like a couple of the other speakers where they had mentioned, well, were you in the same room when I was putting together my own notes? Same thing, Gerard, and really that speaks to some of the other speakers. They tapped on what is obviously where there's some commonality there in some of our concern areas, or in recognizing some of the areas that we're doing right. So you're not supposed to apologize when you start speaking, but I'm Canadian. We apologize for everything. So I'm sorry if you're going to get any redundancies in what I'm going to talk about, because there's so much commonality, so much to talk about. Debbie, maybe this is fodder for Ops Central Fire Service Training 2.0 in 2022. So we start training recruits from day one. What are we doing right with those fresh minds, and what are we doing better? That's really two questions. So I'm going to break it up, and I'm looking at it through the lens of the North American Fire Service, and also through the lens of that constantly self-evolving training officer. For me, before I ask what are we doing right, I need to ask, is our right? What's our department's standards? If we're training to the NFPA standard, which in my opinion is a pretty low one, that's one thing. Are you training to is it a more traditional approach? Is it a more progressive approach? You need to determine, what your success parameters are before you determine if you're achieving success. So I think that's a question that begets the question: is our right? Once you figure that out and there's agreement on the criteria against which a department measures recruit success, and you can measure it, and sometimes getting to that level of agreement can take a fairly deep and critical dive into your current training program, and that can be a heavy undertaking. But kind of back to the broader question, what are we doing right by our fresh minds? One thing we're doing right is what we do best, I believe. Again, a North American perspective, I believe we are still instilling the knowledge and respect for the traditions in the fire service. I don't see that something that gets left by the wayside here in North America, in both Canada and the U.S. I don't want to go over which traditions have value and which ones don't, and I'll approach that later in my answer. But in the end, regardless of which end of that progressive fire spectrum that you sit on, tradition is still an integral part of fire service training. Second, I think we're starting to introduce recruits to safer, more advanced tactics. Gerard, I think you kind of tapped on that. Tactics that are based on scientific study and a large sampling of outcomes. These are tactics that still get the job done, but they're more effective, they're more efficient, and they're done with the everybody goes home axiom. I think that's a good thing that we're doing. But I believe the best thing that we're doing is really between tradition and progression is we're starting to find our way to the middle. And that's a journey, and different departments and different fire services are sitting in different areas on that spectrum. But I think we're starting to move in both ways. It's too bad we couldn't get our politicians to do that. And I think that when we recognize that we're starting to meet in the middle, we need to, with that recognition, we need to also recognize that we need to harness that momentum, not lose that momentum of the melding of tradition and progress. It's definitely the right move forward. Meeting in the middle can mean, on a positive front, it can mean some of the older past practices can be recognized as best practices. Gerard, you had mentioned, getting right back to fire. I think that's okay. I don't think that meeting in the middle means you eschew a tradition. I think there's some great stuff that needs to come back or needs to be reprioritized. But it can also mean that there's recognition that there's things that are done that either no longer apply, they're unsafe, they don't reflect the modern day fire service, and they just don't plain get the job done as well. I do see the fire service moving towards that magical balanced area. Is it a turning of the ship? It definitely is. It's moving away from a tradition based fire academy model. It's going to take time. It's going to take disruption. It's going to take commitment. But it is the right direction. That nod to the past with an eye to the future. In the words of my good buddy, Battalion Chief Paul Watlington, and I'm going to read this right off of here. It's a take on an old fire service quote that's come up twice already in here, that our best outcome resides in adhering to the ideal of 150 years of tradition strengthened by progress. I think it's brilliant. The second part of that is what can we do better? So much. Right. It's a grocery list. And I noticed that we both resorted to a bullet list. I think one of the things that we're doing right, I already mentioned, we're the move towards safety and efficiency, but also the critical addressing of mental health, mental resiliency, which is going to be addressed in a different question. And anything that I mentioned here in terms of what we could do better, it's looking at the fire service as a whole. I know that there are some exceptions out there, some great exceptions of fire departments doing things very, very right. First, I think we're nearing saturation in terms of what we train on. Consistently, I hear, as we did here in the roundtable, no, I think we're doing okay, but we need more time. Well, which is it? If you need more time, are you doing okay? So we're reaching saturation. If you just look at the number of rescue disciplines that we have, Chief Richardson was mentioning that. I forget what it is. It's like a dozen. I think he said under special ops, he's got 15 groups that work under him. That's evidence of that saturation. Older subject matters have been expanded. New ones have emerged. And so the current recruit academy requirements really have become like stuffing 10 pounds of laundry into a 5-pound bag. Or for pretty much everybody out there off of North America, I think that is 4.54 kilograms of laundry into a 2.27 kilogram bag. So I think it's just too much and we don't have enough time. So let's change the academy format, right? We still do the same academy, right? We're teaching more. There's more to learn. It's harder, et cetera, but we're still, how long have you been at a 14-week academy, for example? Well, I've been at a 14-week academy for about 35 years. Okay. It's changed, right? I mean, the situation's changed. Yes, the situation's changed. So you need to change. Oh no, we're not going to change. It's a bit of a head scratcher. So I think it needs to be longer. I think there needs to be a greater time commitment. That's an easy quick fix. Don't get me wrong. I don't think that just stacking on more time is the way to go in terms of the long view. But I think right now we're just giving these guys we're giving our recruits too much. To make for a sound post-academy recruit, the training needs to be truly robust, which becomes more time. And as long as those subject matter areas that I mentioned keep expanding and keep being added, if we want to teach recruits those areas better, we'll need more time doing it. Some departments do have extended academies, but it's a rare one that goes over that 14 weeks. And rare still is that military style overnight academy, which may be a hit for a nice quick fix for the current generation or maybe the incoming generation of firefighters. That's just up for discussion. It was just an idea. As for the other areas of improvement, what can we do better? I'm just going to resort to a bullet list. More training with crews. Intra-training training is great. Inter-training between crews that where it develops the horizontal bonds of teamwork. I think that needs to be realized a little bit more. Some departments do it well. I think we can do better. Tougher vetting and higher standards for academy instructors. It sounds like that's happening in Australia, Gerard. Still, it is often that captain who raises his hand, says, "Okay, I guess I'll do my 2 years of duty as a training officer." Or NFPA instructor 1 is the bare minimum, and that's good enough to go out there and teach our fresh young minds, our new recruits. If training drives the culture of a fire department, by extension, so too does the training officer. But then we look at our vetting techniques, and oftentimes it is, "Oh, you wanna teach on Saturday? Cool." It's not enough, I don't think. The job should be treated as the vital and important position that it is. They need to be highly trained, have significant mileage, significant response mileage, and be vetted as robustly as we vet other high-ranking positions. It's our fresh young minds, new recruits' first exposure to the fire service. It shouldn't be led by a substandard guide. Next one, training on teamwork. We've already touched on that, so I'm just going to basically say it and leave it out there. We passively train on it. We put them through academy, and then we hope that through the commonality of the tasks that they're performing out there, we're out there, we're sweating it out together, we're throwing ladders together, and that's enough to build teamwork. I think it's far too passive. I think utilization of third-party resources is a great possibility. We had mentioned the emerging ideas of human factors and human performance, especially as it relates to team building. There's some fantastic organizations out there like the Mission Critical Team Institute that come in and they specifically work at building individual members into a team. And lastly, most importantly, I think, is life training. There are some departments that will have a family day, which is nice. It truly is. I think it's important. And they'll definitely open up the phone lines. Hey, if anybody in your family needs to call, talk to us, give you access to the EAP right away. And hey, on our last week of Academy, we're going to do some housekeeping items, how to deal with the HR department, what happens when a paycheck gets missing, that sort of thing. I'm talking about concerted training on what resources are really available, where to find them, recognizing when you need them, how best to use them, training that dissolves the stigmas around utilizing them, and that needs to extend to family training. Some, what do we say in the fire service is family is everything. And then we ask them out for a Friday afternoon barbecue, a chat with the chief, and maybe watch us do a drill, and that's enough. I don't think it's enough. I think looking at the new fire department member as part of another unit where they spend the other 2/3 of their life is something that's being missed. And by recognizing it and bringing that family into the fold truly and robustly, I think it's just going to make for a better recruit. That's it.